Guys, I'm so excited to welcome Megan Basham back onto the show today. She became a New York Times bestseller for her book, Shepherds for Sale, how evangelical ministers are trading the truth for a leftist agenda. I might have gotten one word wrong. And we've had her on the show. I mean, it took off. It was one of our most popular episodes. She's a gift to the body of Christ because she has so much courage and is willing to expose the sort of spiritual, moral, political malfeasance of our formerly theological betters at groups like Christianity Today and the Gospel Coalition and all these sort of groups that seem to function more like prostitutes for the Democrat National Committee than they do ambassadors for Christ. And she's exposed through her book the receipts of like actual funding and grants and gifts from hard left, secular, pro-abortion, globalist, communist, pro-trans billionaires that fund quote unquote evangelical institutions and initiatives. You got to ask why they want to fund those initiatives. She has become an enemy of so many individuals and Christian institutions that you and I probably used to respect, subscribe to, and look to for evangelical leadership on public matters. And now they've been exposed. Megan Basham joins the show again today. This is part one of a very insightful, illuminating, and elucidating conversation about Big Eva, big evangelicalism, is big mad because Kamala Harris didn't become president. You hear that? Big Eva is big mad right now. And we're going to talk through the responses from these mainstream massive Christian institutions and their leaders about seemingly how sad they are that Kamala Harris didn't become president. And we're going to talk about groups like Christianity Today. We're going to talk about the individuals who seem to only ever punch right and then nuance themselves into pretzels when it comes to the hardcore secular left, okay? So you need to share this. You need to buy her book. You need to help people who continue to fund Christianity Today and fund these Christian groups who are being used by hard left secular organizations to further progressivism with a little bit of Christianese sprinkled onto it. You do not want to miss this two-part conversation with New York Times bestselling author Megan Basham and a good friend of the Seth Gruber Show here. Buckle up, you're in for a treat. I'm Seth Gruber, and this is the Seth Gruber Show. Megan, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Yeah, so, I was cracking up. I was texting you because I was sort of like, I looked at all your interviews from Shepherds for Sale, and I'm like, more views. I got more views. I got more views. And I was like, man, my humble little show. I looked at every Shepherds for Sale interview I could find on YouTube when your book came out. And I was like, more people watched ours than Allie Bestucky's. I'm like, yeah. So that had a huge impact. I don't know why the Lord allowed that to happen, but it reached a lot of people. And there's so much to talk about because I think your book sort of almost set a new standard now. It revealed so much. And so I want to talk about Big Eva and their crying after Kamala lost. But I just want to tell you one thing because I haven't told you this yet, and I want people to check this out because I bet a lot of people had similar experiences in their lives following the release of your book. An old buddy of mine that youth pastor and at a church I used to be at right after college, he stopped talking to me for a long time because I went after Ed Stetzer and I went after Biola. This was years ago. And he basically told me I needed to repent. He told me that I was, maligning the brethren. I was causing division and all this stuff. Anyways, he texted me a couple weeks ago, Megan, and he said, Megan Basham, oh my gosh, Seth, you were right about everything. You were right about Stetzer. You were right about Biola. I'm praising God for Megan's book. He set up a donation to my ministry, and he said, we have to expose these people. And so
that makes my day. Thank you.
Isn't that cool?
Yes.
So there you go.
Because I thought maybe you were going to go the other way because I've had friends say, People who endorsed my book go, yeah, I'm getting emails, demands for meetings to discuss my endorsement and things like that. So there's been a lot of that sort of backroom communication going on.
Yeah, no, there's people waking up who otherwise I think would have been, part of Big Eva, and now they're really seeing it. And I think Shepherds for Sale probably did more to awaken people about these institutional managers who have positioned themselves as Christian leaders than
That's such a good term. Such a good term.
than perhaps anything else in the last couple years. And so there's so much to talk about. But firstly, I just wanted to thank you for writing the book. I think a lot of people who listened to the last interview and my show have really come to respect you, and they really are they're almost like they're little anti-Big Eva disciples.
Yeah.
Right now that I said that, people are going to lose it that I just said that. They're disciples of Jesus, but I mean they understand now that so much evil and confusion has been created by these men that we thought were Christian leaders, because they actually don't care about the sheep. They actually don't care about pure and undefiled religion or a bold church. They just care about their status, their speaking invites, their book sales, and rubbing shoulders with the political elites of our day. And so it's almost like you have almost commissioned and almost sent out thousands of believers who they now see it.
Yeah.
And so they're sharing stuff about these people and who they really are and what they're really incentivized by. And so as you join the show again, I just wanted to thank you for writing it. And I think it's probably doing more good than you even realize.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And it was great to hear. Like I said, I get it goes the other way sometimes. So that's encouraging.
Yeah, that's right.
And I need to go back and watch our interview and try to, reverse engineer. Okay, what was the title? What did we, what sparked that? Because it was just huge. And so I'm so grateful for that.
So I was watching Daily Wire because I'm a all access subscriber on election night, and we had friends over, and so it was fun seeing you on screen there in the backstage. And then I'm watching I guess Big Eva takes hot takes on social media the next morning and then in the week following, and I was just the emoji, the hand face emoji,
Yes.
like I was just doing that to myself,
A lot of
and
the
I was
too.
yeah, I was I've got to get Megan back on and ask her about this. But there were so many weird takes and responses from Big Eva that I had to think through and compile them again. But what was the most shocking to you? And because I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned from this sort of stuff. And so, you were there, you were watching everything. Wind up Megan Basham and let her go. But first, we want to thank our sponsor of the Seth Gruber Show, Every Life Diaper Company, the pro-life, pro-family diaper company that's fighting against the culture of death that stands for Every Life. Because every major diaper company and baby brand rhetorically and financially supports the abortion industry. It's hey, we want you to buy our diapers, but we also want you to abort your baby so you can't buy our diapers. Huh? What? That's the woke mind virus at work. If you want to fight the woke mind virus and rebuild a culture of life, you've got to do so in part with your wallet. Don't fund people who hate you and your values. Get your baby diapers and wipes from everylife.com. Promo code Seth10, Seth10 for 10% off your first order. Everylife.com. If we're going to rebuild a culture of life, we can't literally fund the culture of death. Everylife.com till your nursery at your church, your friends having babies, and the pregnancy center in your city to get their wipes and diapers from everylife.com. Promo code Seth10. Let them know that we sent you and you support the White Rose Resistance at the Seth Gruber Show, and you help rebuild a culture of life. Thank you, Every Life Diaper Company, for being a sponsor of the Seth Gruber Show.
Well, a lot of them weren't surprising. I saw a lot of things come out from people like Russell Moore, who put out that essay about how we're going to survive the next 4 years. It was a highly offensive essay that essentially said that the reason that people voted for Trump, and he actually likened it to a porn addiction. Which is really not surprising because he recently likened Allie Beth Stuckey to a Nazi. So he's really on a tear lately.
That's right.
But he likened it to porn addiction, saying that people just want the dopamine hit of the entertainment that Trump provides, and they like the outrage cycle. And so all of these, a historic level of Black and Hispanic voters who came over to Trump, the blue collar workers who came over to Trump, all of these people who are a new part of this agenda and this coalition, he's basically saying that all of them just want the little shot of adrenaline they get when Trump does something controversial or says something that the managerial class freaks out about or reacts against. That's what they were doing, and I find that so insulting, but 100% not surprising. Also not surprising to see, the interview that he did with Curtis Chang and David French, his buddies who created the hard left secular funded after party, which, as you said, has gone on to campuses like Wheaton College and into ostensibly conservative megachurches. They did this little breakdown where, Curtis Chang at points to me seemed almost on the verge of tears when he talked about being that he needed to step away and unplug and try to not face what has just happened. He talked about being overcome with anxiety and anger. That's not surprising. But in a more serious way, one of the things that was really shocking to me in that interview was that Russell Moore said in the midst of Curtis Chang's lament that we missed out on an opportunity to restore responsible government in this election.
Did he really?
Yes. And so he called the Harris team the responsible option. And that, as a Christian, for me, is so appalling. Because when you think about, okay, his objections to Donald Trump, let's leave those aside. Let's look at what the Harris campaign represented as a set of policies. It represented the mutilation of children. It represented the threats to the safety of women by admitting mentally ill men into their spaces who like to pretend that they're women. And there have been real costs. I mean, we have seen women injured to the point of partial paralysis by competing in sports with men.
And prisons.
And prisons, yes. So just before the election, her campaign was campaigning on porn for young men. We will protect your porn. She campaigned on, we will not allow religious liberty exemptions on abortion. You could not look for a more evil agenda. And for him to say that was the responsible option, it's really hard to wrap your mind around that as a Christian. And then maybe the biggest headline, you and I talked about it a little bit in text and off air, was Crew, its oneness and diversity team, because they've been out there saying, we're not woke anymore, we got rid of all of this. Well, their response was to send out this email to reportedly to their BIPOC staff members, which of course, Black, Indigenous, people of color, if you don't know the woke lingo, to talk to them about how to process their grief over this election, and that they may need to journal, and that they should talk to someone who is safe. All of this was so astonishing in light of the voters that Donald Trump attracted in this election. And so dismissive of those people.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah.
So anyway, all of these things, not really surprising. And then the last one, just to kind of do the full roundup, was the John Piper. I love John Piper. I've learned so much from his ministry. A lot of people, in fact, kind of get on my case and go, when I express my affection for John Piper, because they're like, oh, he was always left. And I'm not saying that, but he put out a tweet immediately in the wake of the election, not celebrating that this gives the pro-life movement an opportunity to continue to fight. I know we're not getting everything we want, and there's some, great disappointment there, but the alternative was exponentially worse. About none of these other moral issues, it should be incredibly important to Christians. Instead, what he put out was, I don't remember the exact language, but something about, well, we defeated one evil and we will now be tested with another evil. And that was all he said about the election.
That was it. Yeah, that was it. Yeah.
It was just astonishing.
You know what's so there's you in typical Basham style just summarized things that we could talk about for 5 hours. But what's so concerning about that is there's a sense in which John Piper's right. And I'm sure we can put the tweet up on the show. God's delivered us from one evil, now to test us with another. Like, there's a sense in which, like, there's truth to that. Trump has used pro-abortion rhetoric and his influence and his continued insistence that, we do need some abortions has influenced the GOP. And they removed a lot of the Republican National Committee platform language about the protection of the unborn and marriage. I mean, I just did a whole show ripping Vivek Ramaswamy a new one from on the campaign trail with Trump when he's saying, like, hey, gay people, you marry whatever you want.
Right,
it's all,
right.
And I unpacked, like, how getting that wrong has led to everything else wrong in the culture. Like, I'm happy to rip the GOP a new one, Megan. But, like, dude, there's nothing wrong with celebrating that Jezebel fell from her tower.
Right.
Okay, on November 5th. But he doesn't, like, John Piper doesn't say anything about what we avoided, anything about the civic responsibility of the Christian now to fight against evil for the next 4 years. It's just like, well, one evil and another evil, and it's all evil. It's like, it sounds like his article actually from 2020, right before the election, where he said, I've covered it at the time. I don't know if people remember this, but in 2020, 2 weeks before the election, I don't know, 3 weeks, he posts this article, Megan, on social media, and the caption was, "This is the closest answer you'll get to me from me as to who I'm voting for." And then you read the article, and it's like, pride is sin. Killing babies is sin. And you know that he's talking about Trump and Biden. And so It's like, pride leads to death and abortion leads to death because sin leads to death. And so both are evil. And so, all right, I'm John Piper tuning out. And that's how the article ended. And it was like, wait, what a second? Wait, what? It's just weird. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, because he's never been like, he's not like an Ed Stetzer, Russell Moore leftist.
Right.
He's preached on abortion as pagan, demonic sacrifices to Moloch, like John Piper has.
And
it's
he's
almost
solid on these
I don't
marriage
understand
questions.
it, Megan. Like, you know the phrase, like, I'm a fiscal conservative and social liberal. It's like for some of these guys, it's almost like they're social conservative and political agnostics. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
No, that's a really good point. And you're right. I mean, he's been very solid, unfortunately, even more solid than some people like Alistair Begg, who I also love, who was encouraging people to, yes, attend the gay wedding and bring a gift.
Right.
Piper got that right, and I appreciate that. But when I look at that, I'm just going to give you my analysis. I don't know. But what I see when I see that is just a lack of understanding about what politics is. Politics is in the civic sphere, and what it is an opportunity in a society of self-rule to exercise the political power that has been invested in us. And you are always going to do that in messy ways, because you're never going to get the ideal candidate who aligns with your views on everything and who's going to do exactly what you want. So it is a game of trade-offs. And that was just as true for George W. Bush as it is for Donald Trump. And in fact, Donald Trump gave us things that George W. Bush said he wanted but didn't work for, whereas Donald Trump doesn't really pay the lip service and yet gave it to us. So I understand that.
It's interesting.
But when I looked at what Piper said, some people said, well, he's just saying that we got the lesser evil, so now we have to not be tempted to capitulate to the lesser evil. And I'm like, no, that's actually not what he said. The subtext to me of his post was and the same thing with that essay that you referenced, seemed very clearly that these two things are moral parallels, that they are equivalent. So we avoided one kind of evil, we have another kind of evil. He did not suggest in any way that we have been spared something here. And we have, in an enormous way, been spared something.
Massive,
Yes, I'm incredibly disappointed about the Trump administration's language on abortion. On the other hand, what we faced would have been so much worse, and we now have an opportunity to fight to have a place at the table. And what Piper is doing is saying, let's go ahead and concede and relinquish that place at the table. And I think that's so wrong. And in fact, I'm always sort of the Debbie Downer, and I hate to do that because I am rejoicing and I am celebrating, and I think we were spared, and I think great mercy has been shown to us, and we need to capitalize on it. But when you actually look at the breakdown now of what we're seeing in terms of who voted and by what margins, if you look at 2020 to 2024, yes, Trump won, this greater percentage of black voters, of Latino voters. 3% more Catholics voted for Trump. But the evangelical vote was down, and this is based on George Barna's research that he just put out, between 2020 and 2024, between 6 and 8%, depending on which group you're looking at.
Down.
So while all of these other groups were going, okay, for all of these reasons, we are going to align with this new coalition, evangelicals, I don't believe that they went to the left. I don't believe the majority of those, and I have to look at this research, I don't believe they went and voted for Kamala Harris. I think they sat out because they are getting this message because they have a bad political theology about what politics is. And it isn't your involvement in the church. And, I think it was Steve Day say something about, if your political ideology, like your faith, is without works, it's dead. So if you're not using that power, that stewardship you have with your vote to enact the best policies you can, then your ideology is dead and it's worthless.
Yeah. So, so there's, I don't want to get into this too much, but just as an example, there's these sort of immediatists. They call themselves abolitionists, who are like no compromise on abortion. But what they mean by that is like they weren't going to vote at all, right? Because there wasn't a pro-life candidate, right? Like Trump is saying pro-choice stuff, and so they believe that you'll be held accountable by God for blood on your hands. Now, this is their language, not mine. If you vote for Trump, and so all these people were posting. Ben Zeisloft and others who I have some respect for. He writes at the Daily Wire, but he posts this thing that goes viral, and it shows him writing in like, Dusty Devers or something like that. And I was like, dude, what a waste of your vote. And then one of his friends did the same thing. And I said, this is like Pilate doing this and just washing his hands of the more dirty aspects of the political system so he can make himself feel, removed. That, at least I'm not getting my hands dirty. Let me just excuse myself from this political affair. And that wasn't received very well when I said that. But I agree with you. I think this is a fundamental misunderstanding of what political civic responsibility is for the Christian in a constitutional republic in 2024.
Yeah, and I love so many of those guys, and I respect them, and I'm happy to debate with them. It was funny. I've kind of slowly over time really probably adopted most abolitionist outlooks on so many of these questions. I think we have a problem when we won't acknowledge that most women know what they're doing when they get an abortion. I think the default of, we should never in any way hold women responsible for their participation in the abortion process has been a mistake. And I think you can see that when you look at Europe. Yeah, totally when you look at, like in the UK, they have abortion laws that if a woman gets an abortion after a certain point that is illegal, she can be prosecuted. We don't have that here. Right. So I think that's a totally legitimate discussion that we need to be having. But I disagree with how you get a seat at the table. Yeah. I think we can look at the moral majority years, and they have been so just derided over the years. And I think that was actually a tactical move by Big Eva to say, well, we all need to sort of make the moral majority embarrassing. And instead, I really think in so many ways, we need to look at why they were successful in getting the GOP to acknowledge them to the degree that they did and say, how do we replicate that now? Now, we have a different playing field in the fall of Roe. And so we need to think about, okay, how do we enact that? And I mean, that's such a big topic, is what is our political theology and how do we understand how we leverage our influence, because we're doing it badly. One way I know for sure you don't do it is by saying we're just not going to participate.
Yep. But so John Piper sort of fills this box of kind of like, I'm done. I'm gonna wash my hands of all this political stuff. Trump mean tweeting, orange man, pagan, can't vote for him. Kamala, child sacrifice, sexual child mutilator, can't vote for her. I'm out. I'm very grateful that millions of more Christians didn't listen to John Piper, frankly. However, then there's another group. So that he kind of, I guess, fills in like the bucket we might call like, political agnosticism, if you will. But then you go, let's go further left, I guess, Megan. And there's folks who in the church, this is why we're having this conversation, guys, as you're listening to Megan and I. Okay, like, unless the church flatulent becomes the church militant, it will become the church irrelevant, okay? As goes the church, so goes the family. As goes the family, so goes the culture. As goes the culture, so goes the country. That's why all of this matters. Christian nationalism, that's how America was birthed. You used to have to prove your membership at a Protestant church before you could appear on the ballot in some of the early colonies, okay? So that's why we're talking about all this stuff. Now there are people in the church, in the institution of the church, in evangelicalism, okay? We're not talking about Catholicism. That pretend to be bipartisan. They pretend to be just focused on saving souls, just the gospel kingdom work. And they say that, they represent that, they imbibe that. But then the way that they respond to news, the way that they respond to, let's say, Trump winning or something else, you're looking at this and you're going, I don't buy it. I don't believe that you're bipartisan. I don't believe that you're, completely disconnected from any type of pull on your funding, talent, or time from either side of the political aisle because you're just focused on the gospel. I don't believe you. Here's one that I wanted to get your take on, Megan. Okay, so Mike Cosper, who I've been getting into it with on Twitter or X, he's at Christianity Today, guys. If you're new to this whole Big Eva conversation, that's big evangelicalism. If that's your first time hearing that phrase, they're the institutional managers and theological betters of Christendom. And he did the podcast, The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill. Mm-hmm. That was Mike Cosper. I asked him when he's going to do The Rise and Fall of Christianity Today, and he didn't respond. But his boss is Russell Moore, who's the editor-in-chief of Christianity Today. He's part of the after party, which we're going to return to that in a second. And so he is very upset, Megan, that RFK Jr. has been selected by Trump to lead the HHS, the Health and Human Services, and because he says he's pro-abortion, and he says that this is inexcusable. He says, here you go, mate. He says, many pro-life evangelical friends told me it was immoral to vote for anyone but Trump. But today, Trump nominated a radical pro-choice activist to be the HHS secretary. He says, so congrats, pro-lifers who insisted we vote for Trump. There's nothing pro-life about this party or this man or his appointees. And for those frustrated by the economics of the Biden years, I urge you to call your senators and pray they block the dumber of these appointments, of which RFK is the highest on the list, and pray with fury that the Senate finds their spine to block him. What a disaster if he gets confirmed. Yes, I have publicly ripped RFK Jr. on my show for being pro-abortion, okay? But methinks the lad doth protest too much. Why, what are your hot take on why this is all horse manure from Mike Cosper and Christianity Today?
Right. Well, 2 words, Francis Collins. I mean, it's pretty simple. For those who, I think probably most people are familiar, but if you're not, Francis Collins was for many years through Obama, and Trump kept him on the advisors of so many of these deep state people, and through the Biden administration, was the head of HHS, of the National Institutes of Health, of the NIH. So most powerful scientific official in our country, otherwise known as Anthony Fauci's boss. And he has an abominable record on abortion. Actually, when the Trump administration, the supposedly pro-choice, Trump administration wanted to roll back research into stem cells, he's fought to protect that. He fought to protect research on aborted baby parts. His NIH funded gruesome chimeric experiments that included things like grafting infant scalps onto lab rats. And he has defended it. Yeah. And so, by the way, the idea that Francis Collins, because some people kind of floated that, well, maybe he wasn't really aware. It's a huge government department. Well, I happened to report on a leaked audio of a private meeting.
Talk about it.
Yes, that a presentation that he gave with Russell Moore. So Russell Moore knew Christianity Today, very aware of Francis Collins' records. He gave this presentation at David Axelrod's political department at the University of Chicago, I think it was,
Yep.
where he talked about, yes, this is my record, but we have to ask ourselves, can we do something good with these babies that are going to be aborted anyway? Never dealt with the fact that doing that creates a traffic for aborted baby parts.
Yep.
So completely left that out of the equation. Russell Moore did not push. He's standing right there. He's part of this presentation. Offered no sort of pushback. Just says, this is my friend who I know is a good, strong Christian.
In fact, here's the quote from your reporting, which I covered, Megan, in my article at Clear Truth Media, from your leaked audio from the University of Chicago. And you actually make the point, Megan, that Russell Moore invited Francis Collins to this event at the University of Chicago. And a student or someone in attendance asked Francis Collins about the NIH funding experiments that harvested body parts from full-term babies at the University of Pittsburgh. Moore stood by and listened to Collins basically twist himself into pretzels to explain why it's okay to slice up kids for science. And then Russell Moore said, quote, "I don't have to agree with every Christian on everything in order to see the fruit of the Spirit in that person. Nonetheless, I can respect him as a Christian." End quote. Can you indeed?
Well, and look, this is just part of it, right? It doesn't even touch on the fact that Francis Collins spearheaded a new LGBTQ initiative that included directing funding to transgender research on children, including giving kids as young as 8 cross-sex hormones, puberty blockers, mastectomies to girls as young as 12. So this is not a faithful, Christian
as young
presence.
As 12?
I think it was 12 or 13. So which, not a real great distinction there.
I'm sure it's because they had breast cancer, right? That's why they needed mastectomies.
Right. So, this was absolutely transgender research. I mean, it goes on. Look, he funded as part of that initiative that, he bragged about when he declared himself an LGBTQ ally when he was speaking to that audience and was not speaking to the Christian audience. That also included a research project that tracked the homosexual sex of teenage boys with adult men without telling their parents.
Yep.
So just really horrific things. And when we look at that, I just want people to know Christianity Today knows all that. And in September, meaning just a couple of months ago, they did this podcast, self-glorifying podcast with Francis Collins, once again trying to rehabilitate his image for Christians and to present him as a faithful Christian brother. So these are the things that show you there is a level of hypocrisy here when they talk about their objections to Robert Kennedy being appointed to Health and Human Services. And they don't answer that. So, and it's not like they didn't know, right? My reporting's been out there. Your coverage has been out there. They know about Francis Collins, and they are helping to cover for him.
Here's Mike Cosper's tweet from September 24th. I have it here. "I sat down with former NIH director Francis Collins to talk about lessons learned during COVID, things he'd do differently, the nature and limits of science, and the experiments of having your own community turn against you. It was a remarkable conversation." Right. That was September 24th. By the way, I responded to that, Megan. Excuse my language. I said, "Dude, find where you buried your testicles. I'll raise the money to help you reattach them, and you can stop being Big Eva's pimp and actually call Francis Collins to repentance for being the 21st century Mengele instead of looking for your +1 to Davos."
I sort of love that you're on Twitter doing, or X now, doing all this because it makes me look very winsome and mild.
Yeah, no, you are very winsome compared to me. Mike. So that Mike Cosper didn't respond to that, by the way. And then I said, "Mike, it's interesting to see you bring such moral clarity to the killing babies issue when it comes to anything Trump does. Where the flip were you, as Collins was treated like a celebrity by your boss and employer despite his funding of full-term baby scalping?" Also, no response. I'm so confused, Megan.
Let me bring up one more thing really quick that Cosper doesn't respond to. Whenever I bring it up, he's like, that's a non sequitur, or I don't know. He has some reason that he won't respond to it. And that is the fact that the chairman of the board of Christianity Today, his employer, was not just somebody who said, like John Piper, "I don't think we can vote for either of these options," or other people who said, like Ben Zeisloft, "I don't like their positions on abortion, so I'm not going to vote for either one. He was an evangelical for Harris. There was a group, Evangelicals for Harris. He was the leading voice.
What's his name again?
Claude Alexander, Bishop
That's
Claude
right.
Alexander. Yeah, he is the chairman of the board of Christianity Today, Mike Cosper's employer. So if Mike Cosper is so concerned about that, why is the chairman of his board encouraging people to vote for a campaign that promised there would be no religious exemptions on abortion? So not only would they ensure abortion up to birth throughout the country, keep in mind, they have promised we will restore Roe. We want no exceptions. They were promising to ensure that Christians would be compelled to participate in it.
Wait, did you say Claude Alexander was Evangelicals for Biden or Harris or both?
Harris. Well,
Yeah.
excuse me, yeah, Evangelicals for Harris,
Yep, here it is right here.
which was originally Evangelicals for Biden and then morphed, you know?
Yep. Yeah, this is from August 10th of this year. Evangelicals for Harris speaker list. There it is.
Yep.
Claude Alexander, the chair of Christianity Today, and and Claude Alexander is the current board member of Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary.
And InterVarsity. He sits on the board of InterVarsity as well.
Oh my goodness. So here's another. Okay, so what we're doing here, guys, okay, is we're merely observing unequal outrage, okay, and selective outrage, and we're testing the premises and pontificating of our theological betters to see if they actually mean what they say they mean. Ali Bestucky on November 14th. This is interesting, Megan. This is something that Mike Cosper responded to. Ali said, 9 years ago, Donald Trump and Megyn Kelly were on horrible terms. She pressed him in a debate. He attacked her in the press. Now she's one of his biggest advocates in media. What went on in her life and in her mind that caused her to go from Trump's enemy to a speaker at his campaign rally? The hilarious and brilliant Megyn Kelly tells me today. So Mike Cosper, Megan, responds to this and just retweets, incentives, my dear boys and girls, incentives. So
Yeah, the
here's what I
incentives
said.
of not having men in women's spaces, the incentives of not mutilating
Yeah.
children. Megyn Kelly told us why. And those
Why,
are
I
some
know.
pretty legitimate incentives, I would say.
Mike Cosper knows better
Right.
why Megyn Kelly does what she does, you see, than she does. Wait, he's starting to sound like a chauvinist. So I responded to that, Megan. Here's what I said. Hey, Mike, how many hundreds of thousands of dollars did Christianity Today receive again from that left-wing pro-abortion globalist communist who helped fund one of your initiatives to help pastors preach better? Incentives, my dear boys and girls,
Right.
incentives. Can you talk about that?
Yes. So they have received millions of dollars from the Lilly Endowment, which is
I lowballed it. Millions.
yeah.
Oh,
You
gosh.
did. Which is, you know, they say there's separation. But look, the people who sit, the head of the Lilly Endowment is incredibly woke. I'm forgetting her first name, but her last name is Cardona. She's incredibly woke. And she sits at the head of the Lilly Endowment. It was founded by the Eli Lilly Pharmaceutical Company. So we're talking about, you know, Big Pharma started this endowment, and they say there's separation between them, which that's as may be. But what we know is that the Lilly Endowment is not just giving money to hand out Bibles here. They are giving money to help shape content.
Yeah.
And that is their preaching initiative. So that was what they've been giving money to, and other things. And keep in mind, by the way, I want to note that this wasn't like a grant that Christianity Today just applied for. When you dig deep into the documents, it notes that Lilly specially invited them to apply for a grant. Right. So, and then you look at some of the other organizations that
What was Lenin's term? Useful idiots?
Yes.
So you're
Yes.
saying that like these hard left pro-abortion globalist communist sort of run funds are identifying groups like Christianity Today and saying
Of course,
like
that's what they do. And look, I will say I have had friends defend the Lilly Endowment to me as saying, well, they give some money to some good things too. Well, yes, that has always been the case for every large foundation like Rockefeller or Hewlett. I mean, as they give money to Planned Parenthood, they'll also give to, conservation efforts in Minnesota or something. So yeah, they all do that. And whatever they were in the past is one thing. I can only tell you who's heading up their organization now and the kinds of Christian organizations that they're also giving money to. So they gave a lot of money to seminaries that will talk about reproductive justice. They'll talk Christian colleges. We're very committed to reproductive justice, that they're committed to LGBTQ allyship. In fact, one of the schools, and its name is escaping me right now, supposedly Christian school, but it's a whitewashed tomb, that they gave money to, was so committed to this cause of LGBTQ allyship that they had a tenured professor who was a real Christian who believed in real marriage and actually had the temerity to write about it and be public about his Christian beliefs. They couldn't fire him because he had tenure. So they shut down the entire department and just cut his job. And then when he was gone, they reinstituted it again to make sure that this Bible-believing heretic could not work at their school anymore. And that was a school that the Lilly Endowment gave money to,
I
an
remember you
ostensibly
telling
Christian school.
the story in Shepherds for Sale.
Yeah, so these are the kind of organizations that were part of this grant round with Christianity Today.
I want to restate that because I want people to catch the importance of what you're saying, okay? Megan just told you guys that these far left globalist groups are not funding Christianity Today to help feed the poor in San Francisco or
hand out Bibles,
take care of orphans in Chicago. It was specifically earmarked, go buy Megan's book, Shepherds for Sale. It was earmarked for helping basically like pastors preach better. Yeah. It's like we want to invest in pastors preaching better. Well, something tells me that if they're funding, LGBTQ, gender confusion, abortion stuff, something tells me, I know I didn't go to Gordon Conwell, Megan, but if I had to guess here, I'm guessing that they're not funding that because they just are really looking for the next Jack Hibbs or Gary Hamrick to rise, who's going to preach on biblical marriage and against the sexualization of children. Something tells me that they have a certain kind of pastor and a certain kind of message in mind that they're very interested in funding, and they know that Christianity Today is going to be the vessel in which to create those kinds of pastors.
Right. And when you look at the exact same thing that was going on with the after party, I mean, this is kind of the play that you see playing out again and again, as they will say, hey, look, our curriculum is just about teaching Christians to reframe their political thinking. It's nonpartisan, which, yeah, sure, it's nonpartisan. Then David French goes on Phil Vischer's show and says it's about taking on MAGA. So, they kind of let the cat out of the bag. But it's also not true that when you look at the content of these things, it is subtle because they're shrewd, right? You look at it and it is things like they're casting in this curriculum for the after party that was also Christianity Today aligned and is one of their partners and developed by Russell Moore. Right. What they will do is they will cast the conservative white Christian as somebody who lacks empathy for others. And he had to learn from the progressive, they give these little vignettes, here's an example of how this will work. And the vignette includes a minority Christian who's got a really soft heart for the oppression of others, and the white Christian conservative who lacks empathy and who eventually learns to overcome that lack of empathy. And that's how you reframe your political thinking. So it's subtle, but it's very obvious what they want.
Empathy's not biblical. Empathy is a very bad thing. Sympathy can be good.
Yeah.
But I mean, Allie Beth's been talking a lot about this with her new book.
Yes, she's done great work.
Empathy.
Toxic empathy.
Yeah, because empathy means like I need to become you. I need to see the world exactly how you see it and feel everything you feel.
And indulge.
That's actually not a good thing.
And actually, that goes so well to the conversation that Moore, French, and Chang had about this election. And what Crew put out in saying that, well, we need to, lament, we need to weep with those who weep, the people who are feeling these things. What they're suggesting even if you don't agree with that, they're saying, well, you as the Christian who may be happy that Donald Trump was elected and that we were spared from a Kamala Harris administration, you need to not express that, because you need to weep with those who weep and lament with those who lament. And what that does, one, is it does take our public witness away, because we as a church are not saying, hey, we celebrate good things and this was a good thing, this we were spared and we should celebrate that. But the other thing it does is it's saying you have to indulge people's unfounded histrionic reaction to this election, and you absolutely shouldn't indulge that. If they're feeling, I'm afraid, you don't indulge this bizarre phobia. What do you think is going to happen to you? Your groceries prices are going to go down. Your gas prices are going to go down. There's nothing to be afraid of here. And they're saying, they're encouraging Christians to say, no, indulge this hysteria.
Yeah, that's well said. I would add to it that actually you do have something to be afraid of, because we're coming for your abortions.
Well,
and,
yes.
Yeah. So, but
and your trans surgeries and those they should be afraid. Yes, those practicing evil should be afraid of the restraining hand of government.
Yeah. Well, that was such a nuclear conversation with Megan Basham that the guys, we had to break it up. It's too much truth. Okay, too much institutional slapping to handle for one episode. Come back, okay, later this week for part 2 with my conversation with Megan Basham, as we dive even deeper into the receipts that prove all of this stuff, into admissions even from some of these leftists that sprinkle a little Christianese onto their evangelicalism, as they sometimes even admit that they want the praise and attaboys and seal claps from the pro-abortion, anti-family, anti-Christian, anti-church globalists, because it makes them feel really good. Some of them have literally practically admitted that they are shepherds for sale. We're going to continue this part 2 conversation with Megan in the next episode that we want you to send out and share, of the unequal outrage, the selective outrage of our evangelical betters who seemingly only have the moral and spiritual clarity to condemn political evils when those political evils come from the right, from the conservative side of the aisle, and never from the left side of the aisle. Isn't that interesting? Come back, okay, for part 2 of this conversation soon with Megan Basham, and share it so we can awaken the church to embrace the persecution and the hatred from a post-Christian culture, because that's what we were promised in the Bible. And we need Christians who are willing to suffer for righteousness and stand for righteousness rather than plead for the accolades and attaboys of the culture of death. Come back soon for part 2 of our conversation with Megan Basham. Until next week, until next episode, go to iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, give the show a rating and review. Go subscribe at Rumble in case I'm ever killed digitally by YouTube. And make sure that you join us in Washington, D.C. on January 23rd for Life or Death Con. Go to lifeordeathcon.com and join me and Ali Bestucky and Eric Metaxas and Pastor Gary Hamrick and Joshua Broom and AJ Hurley and many more as we raise the standard and raise the temperature in the fight for life and awaken the blood-bought bride of Christ to rebuild Christian resistance before it's too late. Go to lifeordeathcon.com and get a ticket now. We only have 1,000 seats. And if you're an ally at $35 a month or more at the White Rose Resistance, you get a free ticket to Life or Death Con or any of our future conferences. Until next episode, I'm Seth Gruber, and this is The Seth Gruber Show.